Howdy, partners! Welcome to the Haunted Chronicles, episode 113, and happy Friday the 13th. Dr. Hans Holzer was a pioneer in paranormal research who wrote 150 books, and his influence is still felt today. And let me give you some examples. Without Dr. Holzer, you would be all doing something different tonight, because there would be no Haunted Chronicles, no Mr. Haunted, no Ghostbusters movie. My license plate would not say Ecto-1. And Jennifer Running would not be our co-host, and his methods are still used today. Tonight, our guest is Dr. Holzer's daughter, second-generation ghost hunter Alexandra Holzer, and spring is here. Tonight's episode is brought to you by the Garden Weasel, the revolutionary 5-in-1 tool that makes gardening fun and easy. That's Garden Weasel. I am Mr. Haunted, and hosting with me tonight is the baby-faced assassin, Brock Burrows. Jennifer is in the Himalayas searching for the elusive Yeti. No, she's at her son's college graduation. Congratulations, Wyatt. And Jen will be back next week, and she said she misses everybody. Brock, holy mackerels, what a show we got tonight.
I know. I can't wait. It's been a crazy day, and congratulations, Wyatt. But Virginia Tech also graduated today, and the mass amount of people floating around here. But soon, yeah. But soon we'll be able to park without all the students here. So it'll be nice. But
that'll be a hoot.
Yeah. I mean, they delayed us this morning because university commencement in Lane Stadium. That's how many people they have to do it in the football stadium. Started at 8 o'clock, so they told us not to arrive to campus until 10. So sometimes we have to help out with it since we work in the president's office. But it was a good day though. But what I'm very curious about, it's been on my mind all week, is how is Jimmy doing?
Oh, man, I don't have anything prepared, but just...
Liar!
I'm happier than a fat-faced whistle pig doing backflips through a blueberry field full of flora and fauna, man.
Nice. Nice. That's not pretty happy. That's extremely happy.
And before we bring Alexandra in, in every interview I've ever done, they always ask, what got you interested in investigating the paranormal? My answer is always, like, as a wee lad, I was watching you could go back and listen to all my interviews, all three of them. I was watching the television show In Search Of, and the topic was ghosts. Each week they had a different topic, UFOs, Bigfoot, whatever. And this particular episode was ghosts. I was a little kid. And after the show, I immediately went into the basement and turned off the lights. And I got this little flashlight with silver with a red button on it. I still remember it. And I was armed with a flashlight, and I searched the basement for ghosts. I was scared, but I was looking. And
nice.
To explain the Ghostbusters reference that I said before, Dan Aykroyd said that Dr. Holzer was the inspiration for the film Ghostbusters. So imagine how our lives would be different right now without that movie. Me anyway.
Yeah, no, exactly.
And yeah.
What do you think about the new one getting ready to come out?
Perfect timing for that question, Brock. Because in the upcoming Ghostbusters movie, Kate McKinnon's character is named Jillian Holtzman, a definite nod to the Holzer family. And I talked about this In Search Of episode because just this week I was looking to see if it might be on YouTube. I thought it was too old to be on YouTube. And I found the episode and watched it. And guess who was featured in the whole episode?
Jimmy Haunted.
Alexandra's dad. So finally.
Nice. It's good. Everyone needs to go watch that because Jimmy wouldn't be right here right now without that episode.
Darn tootin'.
Awesome.
So, our guest tonight is dedicated to carrying on the Holzer legacy and methods. She's an author, researcher, intuitive, a mother of 4, Alexandra Holzer. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
You're welcome. And before we get to some questions for you, you agreed to join us in our traditional scary movie celebrity birthdays.
Brave lady.
I did.
Brave.
I know. I hope I don't regret it.
Nah, it's fun. And join us and play at home, folks. Play along at home. And what this is, for new listeners, some people who have appeared in scary movies celebrate a birthday next week, and you're going to guess how old they're going to be. Okay.
Ooh, let's do it.
Okay, play along in the chat, fellas. The first one is Bill Paxton, who was in Apollo 13, Aliens, Twister, Terminator, Titanic. He was Brock Lovett in Titanic. And a special tidbit of information, his first role was the radio operator in the Pat Benatar Shadows of the Night video, which we'll be hearing at halftime. So go look at that video one day, and that was Bill when he was just a kid yet. How old will Bill Paxton be this week?
62. I'm going to say 62.
Alexandra?
I'll say 58.
Oh, so close. 61.
Oh.
She hates it already. All right. Robert Pattinson, who I have a problem with, I'll tell you in a minute. He was in Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, The Curse of the Ring, The Haunted Airman, and he was Edward Cullen in Twilight, which I've said over and over again. He's like 80 years old, and he's hanging out with high school girls. Creepy.
Sparkles. Sparkles.
How old will Robert Pattinson be next week?
Let's mix it up. Ladies first.
I'll say, 26.
I was thinking around there. Let's go with 28.
He'll be 30. That was a tough one.
Oh, wow.
I always picture him like a kid.
It's the sparkling.
Even though he's
I
80.
thought younger.
Yes, we know vampires do not sparkle.
Yes, we do.
How about Megan Fox,
Oh.
who was in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Transformers, Jennifer's Body, and Jonah Hex. And she was in that movie, what's it, Lindsay Lohan, when they...
Yeah. I can't think of the name.
Anyone? Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen or something like that?
Yeah, I think that's
She
right.
was rotten in that one. How old will Megan Fox be?
30.
I'll say 32.
She'll be 30!
Yes!
Man, I suck at this.
I was gonna whisper to you to agree with him, but you answered quickly.
I stalk her. No, I'm just joking. I don't stalk anybody.
And this guy, I'm gonna take a shot at this last name, David Boreanaz, who was, yeah, thank you. He was in the TV series Bones,
Okay.
Sleepy Hollow, Angel, and he was Angel in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. I love that series. David Boreanaz.
40. Oh, Dave guessed 45. I'm gonna 48.
I'll say 46.
Meet in the middle, 47, correct.
I hear
And
an
that does
echo.
it for Scary Movie Celebrity Birthdays. I love to throw out my sheets of paper that I store.
Yay!
My first question for you is, aside from the paranormal, can you tell us a little bit about yourself? What you, a lot of people think that that's all we do is ghost stuff. Like, what other hobbies or interests do you have?
Hobbies and interests?
Yeah.
Well, I think also with the paranormal, that's the thought of it all, being about ghosts is just because of the way shows have become. That's just my interpretation of it. But anybody who knows anything about the field knows that it includes a lot more than that. But hobbies and interests. I like art. I love raising children. I like music. Let's see. Writing, obviously. Chatting to lovely folks like yourself. Just living in nature and, saving animals and all sorts of things like that.
And before I forget, for people not, I'll just share the links in the chat room. For people not in the chat, there's a bunch of stuff we want to share with you. You have an appearance coming up. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. We are going to go to the Pine Bush in New York, hosts the annual UFO Festival. And,
Cool.
yeah, it's not really far from where we are. I've never been to it, so it'll be the first year that we're appearing. I'm going to do a 1-hour lecture and bring some of my father's some of his old equipment, some books to kind of reintroduce to people who don't know who he is, and lecture on the Holzer method and who we are moving forward, and just really educate people. So it'll be a good time. It's a very family, fun-filled event to boot, so it's going to be good.
And like I said, the website is alexandraholzer.com, and that has a bunch of links that has basically all your information on there.
Yeah, a little too much. I think I need to change it. There's a lot of stuff on there, so.
Like I said, I will be sharing those when I get a second. What advice would you give those who are just starting out in this field?
The first thing I would say is, understand why you would be interested in being in the field, because today it's really being, a field researcher, and what does that entail, and what part of the field interests that person or people if they're forming a group. Like you just mentioned in the show, it's not just about ghosts per se, but there's a vast array of the unknown, and so you have to kind of understand what interests you and go from there, educate yourself, read some books. Don't watch everything online from the YouTube videos and stuff. Really try to learn who came first, thereafter, who found out what. Form your own opinions, but, really kind of educate yourself beforehand. And then when you actually go to a location or you're in a group and you want to, witness something, understand that it just doesn't happen that way, that you have to be realistic and you have to be very open-minded. Even if you're a skeptic, be a healthy skeptic, and be with like-minded individuals, and don't, be stuck on the fact that everybody has to agree on the same thing. It's very healthy to disagree. That's what makes it very efficient. And but educate yourself. Understand what's out there. Understand what came before. Read the books, and just be smart about it. That's the first thing I would say.
Right. And do you, I don't know if you agree with this. I noticed that as soon as the TV shows started coming out, not the In Search of, the newer ones like Ghost Hunters and that stuff, that they came out with all this new equipment and stuff. And of course, I immediately had to go get the new equipment. But then I kind of went back to, just the camera and some kind of recorder for sound. Mm-hmm. That's what's your opinion on? What I'm trying to get at is, what tools do you think are the best to use on an investigation?
Well, I think it's a personal preference. I know a lot of colleagues that prefer, using an EMF detector, where I sit there and personally, and I just think, how? There's so many variables that can be creating the lights from going off. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So you've got those preferences to, using dowsing rods, which is another thing that I personally don't use, but I don't mock it. It's a preference. I think I like the old-fashioned technology. I think if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I also think newer technology like infrared is fantastic. The millimeter's interesting, but it's not 100%, and so forth. I think we're still not there yet. The whole point is when we're trying to communicate with the other side is we want quicker, clear, concise communication that cannot be manipulated, that gives us information that we cannot possibly have had prior. And that's really kind of where it's at. But there isn't one thing in particular, but if I had to say anything, a really good camera, your voice recorders, a great group of people that each have a different function that bring to the table so that we can collect the best data possible for the research. But, recording, you want your visuals, you want your audio, and you have to use yourself as a tool as well. That's very important. So I think those three basics right there is what you start with.
Yeah, and I totally agree with everything you said, because I think the problem is a lot of younger, or I should say less seasoned people jump into it and say, oh, I need all this equipment. I think we all go through that. But I co-host with Dave a show, Tech Time, and we talk about some of these equipments and how a lot of the equipment that is out there was never designed for the paranormal. It had other uses, and we just imported it in, so it doesn't give you, it doesn't give you a true representation because it wasn't designed for that. And one thing we try to do is spark that questioning and looking for other ways to develop equipment that is designed in the paranormal. But I think one of the things that sets us back, and I'm curious if you think this too, is there's so much bickering and so many people trying to outdo each other that we're not coming together to find solutions. We're kind of dividing us apart.
Well, yeah, and that's primarily because of the internet. And it's a great tool. It's a great invention. Don't get me wrong. However, how we use it can also abuse the field itself, and that's where you have all these videos. I mean, I am guilty of watching them and going through them, and at many times like, oh my God, it looks so real, but without being there, without knowing who shot what, without knowing who was involved, it's so hard to say this is real. Even if it looks so real, you know what I mean? Because today you've even got these apps, and what are apps? That are creating images that are in photos that look real. Everybody's become their own little movie maker.
So it's very
deceiving.
Isn't that aggravating that I think we lived in the best time where there was no Photoshop and no, movie making. So whatever you got on your film that was present at the time, and you could discern whether you believe it or not. But nowadays, I don't know what to believe when I see something, so you got to do it yourself.
Well, that's why we like Polaroids. We actually bought a few Polaroids. We still have a couple of things of my father's, and the whole point, that's why I said, again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. There's a reason why. It's just because it's old or people think it's outdated. Why? Because the teams on TV aren't using it? That's hogwash. It's ridiculous. It's to me, you really need to go back, and that's why I said for people that are interested in the field, whatever part of it, you have to educate yourself. Telekinesis, ESP, meditation. These are all parts and tools that we go into using when we're on an investigation or if we're at home and we want to connect to spirit. These are just things that are lost by the wayside, and so we're trying to bring that back.
Yeah, totally agree.
You know what? There was an interview that you did, and you were talking about I think it was your aunt that passed away.
Yes.
And you had something happen, and they never answered the question because I think they went on to another topic, and I was wondering what happened with that.
Oh, good Lord. Well, I've spoken about that situation a few times. I've been doing this for now, if you can believe this, 10 years when I started doing radio. And really what had happened, I had really never lost anybody growing up as a child into adulthood. I had never lost anybody close to me. And when I had lost her, it was my mother's sister. That was the first time I experienced that kind of a grief. And it was at her service that I felt something take over my body. It was a certain warmth. I couldn't move. I couldn't explain it. I couldn't say anything. I knew I wasn't crazy per se, although I am crazy, but something was happening. It was I don't know, palpable. And then, later on when I had, gone home and tried to process everything, I became clairaudient because I heard her. And it took about a year after her passing. Everything clicked. I became aware, and I was ready to receive her. And that's what opened up my ability to go back to what I used to do as a child, which was be very intuitive, be very open, as most children are. So it really opened up the doorway for me to go back to my roots. I wasn't looking for it. I didn't ask for it. It just occurred that way. So I guess it was the time for me to evolve again. And so she was the pinnacle moment for me at that point.
I got two questions after that one now. But first, what did you hear? And then you also, I think, talked about your grandmother told you some stories or
yeah. Yeah, well, what I heard was, when my aunt she had one foot on the other side and one foot here, and we went to go say goodbye to her, and there was hospice and the whole thing. My Aunt Rosemary was a staunch vegan. She had joined a group at the time, which is a cult that, the whole family was just not thrilled with. Shri Shimnoi out of Queens, New York was a whole thing. And but she believed that he was the ultimate, that was God, so to speak. But while she was, in and out of her state, she wasn't talking to anybody. And I had sat down on the bed with her, and she, looked at me, and I put my hand on her hand, and she pulled me in close. And I said, "What is it, Rosemary?" And she said, "I'm changing." I said, okay. And then she mumbled like she wanted to say something else. When she came back to me and I heard the words, "I love you," was the first thing she said to me. And then it clicked. I said she was trying to say that to me in life before she was going to leave that life to go into the next life. And I'm changing is that she was crossing over from this world into the next. But it it was like puzzle pieces, and it's our job to figure that out when we're in those moments. So that's where that comes from. My grandmother, Rosine Claire, she was very psychic. And, she always would tell me stories growing up as a child of people sitting on her bed if she lost a lot of friends, and she knew who it was in the room. She had some very dark stories as well. She was with my second grandfather. My grandfather was the count, a Russian count, Buxhoveden, Alexander.
I want to be a Russian count.
So do I. Well, I'm part of it, I guess, to some degree. But he was, used to hold seances in a castle in Mijano, Italy, where they lived. So my whole family is tied into it, from the Buxhovedens to the Holzers. And but he had passed when they came to this country. He had a heart attack, and so she eventually remarried a very smart scholar German named Hans Kessler. Hans was diagnosed with cancer, and he was dying. And they were out in their house in Long Island. And just before he had passed, she said that she was awoken to a feeling in the middle of the night in their room. Nobody was at the house. It was just the two of them at that point. And she turned on the light, and there was what appeared to be a dog figure at the foot of their bed staring at them. She knew what it was. She absolutely knew it was evil, it was dark, it wasn't good, and so she panicked, and then it went away, dissipated. And then shortly after, he passed. And so, I had spoken about that, years later with my mother, and she says, well, somebody was coming for him, it was his time, but I don't know, what happened, what does that mean, but the interpretation was of that moment, it was not pleasant.
Wow.
So.
Wow. What, I want to talk about Amityville is going to be more than two. We got 2 minutes left before break. I want to ask what your definition of a ghost and what causes the ghost syndrome. Do you think?
Sure. Well, a ghost is somebody that used to be of the living that is trapped in their environment because they're not aware that they've passed on, and that in some cases they don't want to pass on, move on to the next phase because they want to stay where they are. They're fighting against the fact that their physical self is gone. They have every right to stay where they are, and they don't want to learn what the next step is. So a ghost is a trapped soul, whereas a spirit is free. We get the term free spirit. They can come and go as they please. So there is a difference, and it's sad. I wouldn't want to be a ghost. That's for sure.
Do you think that some spirits just are not leaving? They're not going anywhere?
Some can choose to stay, but if they're free to go, they can go. It's not as painful, I would think, in theory. But if they're staying, there's got to be a reason why. There has to be a cause to it. There has to be a reason why. Whether it's a simple enjoyment of watching the loved ones, have a life every day. They come in and out. I mean, they're not hanging around every single moment. It's impossible. But if they're around long enough, there has to be a reason why. There's causes to it.
Now, I have a quick question. Well, it could be a long, drawn-out question, but we'll try to make it quick. What is your take on the demon craze that's going around, that you have these groups out there going in, not really understanding, and kind of just assuming, oh, you have a demon?
I think demons are good for ratings. Honestly, I think it's as simple as that. There's a lot of negative entities out there, don't get me wrong, that could be very demonic in activity. You've got bad people in life that died, like Hitler, for instance. That would qualify in my books as a demonic entity. So I'm not, so much sold on it. I think it's just good for ratings. I think people are more interested in the negativity of happenings than they are of the positivity of happenings, like angel stories.
Now, do you think that the way the world is right now, it seems like everything's in kind of a negative slump with economies and stuff like that? Do you think that breeds that people just jump to more of a negative thing than, oh, it's just so and so who's acting the way he did in life?
I think so. I think the more energies are focused on the negative side of things, I think you're going to manifest that negativity. Absolutely. It's certainly not helping. If we could flip that and bring more positivity and say it's cyclical and that we do have years of the economy not doing well, and then it flips again, just like the weather. Sometimes we have more snow than other years on the East Coast. So I think it's all relative, but it doesn't help the more people are feeding into something that's negative. I think the outcome will be negative. It's not a good thing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's just about break time. We had over 40 shares of tonight's event, and I explained to you guys on Facebook how it doesn't allow me to see everyone's shares anymore for some reason. But I want to thank all these people for just sharing the page. Paul, Debbie, Sprinkles, Heather, Paranormal Planet, Ghosts and All Things Paranormal, Christine, Independent Paranormal Research Circle, Valerie, Rick and Electric City Paranormal, Diane, Boneyard Paranormal, Joe, BN Hank, Colin, Maggie, Paul, Chant, Cheryl from WSCR, Corey, Valerie, Eric, Tiffany. I have no idea what this one says. Brian on the Fringe, Randy with Big Bear Ghost Seekers, Larkin, Paranormal Cat, Linda, and Lisa. Thank you for sharing, and we'll be right back after these important messages. Welcome back to the Haunted Chronicles. Our guest is Alexandra Holzer. I'm going to thank everyone that's in the chat room. Shout-outs are due. Thank you, Barry, Brock, Kandui, Bill, Carol, Dead Dude Chad, Dr. Dave, Frankie C, Indy Dwayne, Candy, Paramedic, Colin, Sprinkles, Tiffany, Victor and Linda, Maggie Renee, BN, Hank, Russell, Debbie, Desi, Doug, Laura, Cheryl, Lisa M, Corey, Frankie B, Kara E, Nicholas, and Kathleen. If I miss somebody, yell at me in the chat, and I'll get to you. My next question I think everyone wants to know about is your father was an investigator of Amityville, the Amityville case.
Nice.
And can you tell me what his role was in the case? And he really did some research on that. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. Well, I had asked him, God, a long time ago, how, what the involvement was, because we had gotten to a point where we used to have these conversations, and we had the orb fight and the whole thing, yada, yada, yada.
The orb fight?
Oh, please, forget about it. This is a guy who couldn't find his glasses. I'm like, Dad, they're on top of your head. He's like, I knew that. I said, oh, so now you're psychic. Okay, whatever. So, yeah, we used to go back and forth. But, he found out about it by reading in the papers like everybody else. He didn't go after the case. He wasn't a media hound like that, and so they had contacted him to come out and investigate with his medium in tow of choice, which was an older seasoned woman, Ethel Johnson Mayers. And they had gone out there, and he met also with the town historian, the town librarian, the mayor. I mean, this is how he conducted his business. He was very serious about it. He believed you get your history and your facts first and foremost. And so that's how they began the case. And then when they had gone through the house, they took all these Polaroid shots and, video cassette for audio and film and everything. And he came out with a possession theory through Ethel that she channeled this angry chief Indian spirit who was awoken because prior to on the property, a child had found an unearthed skull and used it like a football, and that was sacred. So that kind of unearthed the whole thing. And so his possession theory of what he believed in his findings, also don't forget he was the only one allowed access to the prison where DeFeo was held, and then when he was moved again, went to that prison and was allowed in there as well. So he was very serious about it, and the possession theory was the first of its kind to be entered as a plea into court, and then that spawned, when he had written about it in Murder in Amityville, that became an option to turn it into a film, and that was Amityville 2, The Possession. So a lot of what's in the film was really based on his work, and this is back in the 80s, whereas today, they take things and they I don't know, it's just different. But that's how that all came about. So...
What kind of, do you know how the conversation went? with DeFeo? Like what?
Well, there's cassette tapes on it.
Oh.
We have that. We have the Polaroids, and the clippings and the interviews and things like that. Then we have the letters DeFeo would write my father from prison. But, he didn't like my father, my father was not trying to help the man. He wasn't trying to get him out or anything, but he really did listen to him and really believed that he was taken over by the angry spirit to kill and, seek revenge on anybody that would be in that home at that time with the DeFeo family. So, it's a very sad situation, He wanted nothing to do with it after. He took some other stuff and he made fiction out of it because he was also a very talented writer. And what writers do is we write what we know, and then we can take fact, we can turn it into fiction, and we can take stories off of that. So that's really his stint with the whole Amityville thing. But he wasn't seeking anything from it in that sense of fame or fortune. And let me tell you something, there wasn't any money from that. There was the book deal, and then whatever check they gave him for the film, and that was the end of that. So a lot of misconceptions about that.
What's your theory on, he did a research and found out it was it Indian burial ground?
Mm-hmm.
If
yep.
the homes, for example, that one is in Indiana that the Ghost Adventures guy bought. What's your just because they knocked down the house, if they build a new house on that property, what's your theory on that?
Well, if there is soiled property, if something happened on the parcel, and you go and you build on it, because we're, back in the day, you're dealing with Long Island. You've got, Native Americans, you've got the history. It's not unusual, it's if you look at the names out in the island, Shinnecock, Patchogue, all of it. Just because something happened on your land and there's no structure standing, and then you go and build a structure on there, doesn't mean, it's new walls and a ceiling, nothing's going to happen. It's still, the energy still resonates in that area. You see what I'm saying? So It's not cleansed, it's not cleared. It's still going to perpetuate until it moves on, or we can try to help it move on. And some areas in this world are just, to me, negative, and you just don't want to be in that area.
Yeah. I
have a couple more questions, but if anybody wants to call in with a question, the number is 919-295-0150. It's any chatters. It's right in the chat room there. I want to hear a story about a farmhouse in Austria, please.
Yeah.
If you have one.
I have one. Yeah. Unfortunately, when I found this out, I was like, really? That figure's typical. I was a few months old, and my sister is 8 years older than I am. So I come along, and my parents wanted to get a house, for the summer in Austria, in Vienna, where my father was from. So they had gone out there. They had found this beautiful farmhouse. The hills are alive. Sound of music. I kid you not. The pictures are phenomenal. You've got the mountains in the back. Those two. Thank you. And so they had bought the farmhouse. My mother, who was the one with good with hammers, my father was like, I don't do hammers. I don't do nails. So okay, so my mother did. Little backwards, but okay. So they fixed up the farmhouse. Beautiful, very sweet. And when we went there, things started to happen. So every summer, then I get a little bit older. I had learned how to walk out in Austria in the fields. So I was a toddler, and then became 3 and 4 years old. I knew something was wrong there, not bad, but something was up. So, there was very strong lightning storms, especially when you're in the mountains like that. The whole house shakes, the windows rattle, And my grandmother, Rosine, who married the Counts of Russia, would travel with us to help take care of my sister and I, while my parents would go out and they'd work. My mother worked with my father. So one night, we had a room in the attic, and my sister was very thirsty. So she said, my name was Shura, which is Russian for Alex, and she said, Shura, I'm going downstairs to get water. I'm like, okay, whatever, what do you want from me? So she goes downstairs, and we're having a thunderstorm. And as she turns around to go back up the stairs, at the very top of the stairs, as the lightning is flashing through in and out, there appears to be a figure with a gown on it at their feet. Now, my grandmother always wore bed gowns. You remember that back in the day, they always wore these lovely coats to bed. She was very sophisticated, very French. And so she thought it was Nana. So she got closer up to the top of the stairs, and she looks up, and it's not Nana. This person standing there had no head with this flowing gown. She freaks out, screams, goes through the figure, back up to the attic to me. I started laughing. So the next morning, everybody was talking about it at the breakfast table, so my father had to look into the history of the house, and it turns out that the woman of the house, it was a man and woman, they were farmers, they had owned the land and the house, she had died there, and she refused to leave. So my father says, okay, you can stay. Like, okay.
Poor headless woman.
Yeah, well, I guess she didn't have enough energy to form the whole thing, which I think is funny. No, I mean, but I think it's funny because she made my sister scream, which makes me laugh, so. Wow. How siblings are.
Did you have any stuff happen in your house growing up in New York? Is it in New York?
Yeah, well, of course. My whole environment, I was kind of doomed from the beginning because of what my father did for a living. He also had similar folks stay at the apartment for dinners. They would host parties. They would have, coffee and tea and, round table meetings. They would hold seances, and so that was my environment. So I don't think I could have escaped that energy that resonated in there. A lot of psychics would be there, actors and so forth. So yeah, things would move in my room at night. I always felt like somebody was watching me. If the house got quiet at night, you could hear noises in and out, because don't forget, my father would be locked away in his office lair typing the next book away in the middle till 3 a.m. That was his normal routine. My sister, who was 8 years older than I, when she became a teenager, she was usually out of the house. My parents had gotten divorced when I was 13, so it was just me and my black cat. So, it's like all these things were happening, and I wasn't afraid, but I felt it, and at times I really wouldn't leave my room. Sometimes my door that had no lock wouldn't open. And this is a pre-war building, and these doors were the heavy metal-type doors, that you can't get today, and then the houses and apartments. And sometimes I couldn't open my door. Other times where my room should be nice and warm would be freezing, no explanation. It's just constant.
Wow. And we were talking earlier about EVP. Do you find in your investigations and your experiences that there are certain rules that spirits can't answer and can answer?
Yeah, I feel it's like in life today. It's almost like the teacher is not going to give you the answers to the questions. You have to read the book, and then you have to find the answers in the verbiage. Mm-hmm. Just because they've left their physical self and they know more than we know because they've crossed into that next plateau, if you will, I feel, and I do believe in the theory that my father had written about and other colleagues prior, that we go to different places when we die. There's different levels. There's a hierarchy there, and it's very political. And what information they receive is as far as it goes, and then what they can tell you is as far as it goes. And also what you're meant to know. Just because we can communicate with the other side doesn't mean we're going to be given the winning lottery numbers or what's going to happen tomorrow if we make a decision. They guide us. They give us information and clues, but it's always ultimately, at the end of the day, up to us to piece it together because we're still living that life. They're not there to give us information like that. They're there to educate us to get the information on our own with their guidance. And sometimes through using a good medium or psychic, if you're having a session, you get information, but you're still having to jot that information down and validate it and figure it out as your days go on because it's your life lesson that you have to learn. So that's how it works.
Oh, no callers yet, huh, fellas?
They're scared.
Well, wait a minute. I have a message. Nope. Okay. And I also write down little words here and there to remind myself. Do you have a camp story?
A camp story?
You were at camp?
I went to camp, yeah, but no camp stories.
Okay, I don't know where I got that from.
I know it's Friday the 13th, ha. But no, I went to camp. I hated it. I never went back again.
So, I don't know where I got that from.
I don't know.
Well, now we know that you hate camp. That was good.
Yeah, well, I didn't like the lakes. It was dark, I didn't like bugs, and I wasn't into any of that stuff. It was nice. It was pretty, but it wasn't for me.
Oh, you know what? Could you tell the listeners a little bit about what Hunt with Holzer is?
Hunt with Holzer is a organization that my partner and I created to carry on my father's name and work and also our own work as we move forward each day. Basically, we're trying to re-educate people on who he was, who he still is, because he's still very much around, and trying to go back to kind of, the old ways, and to stay away from what you see on TV, what you always see in films. Growing up, I get it. I love scary films, too. I still do. But, the whole purpose is to understand the life that you're living right now, and how you live and how you die are kind of parallel to one another, if you understand. So the better of a person that you are in your life will help you research and understand what it is you're trying to get information about before you go and end up where the person that you're trying to speak to on the other side is at that moment. So we're really trying to put a reality on it, and educate and answer questions and have people think outside the box, be more open to their own life, how, big the universe is, and that there's so much more to it, that we're actually very small. And the paranormal runs parallel to that. It's not just hunting and excitement and, ooh, I want to have an experience. That's the furthest thing from us. It really has to go back to the basics of understanding, well, who are you and why are you here? It all runs into each other. We're all connected. So that's what we're about. And we have events. We do lectures. I do my intuitive readings personally for people that need help at home, and it's a whole thing, but we really want to get back to the basics.
We have a question from the chat. Paramedic would like to know, what is Alex's most memorable experience?
My father making coffee. I think it was more of a memorable nightmare, but we won't go there.
What did he do?
You run and you go get Tums. I don't know. But
it wasn't so good?
No, it was like mud, but, he thought it was good. I think my more memorable experiences, some of which were childhood, of looking back as an adult and reminiscing moments where now I understand what was happening, potentially in theory, versus today. I think connecting to people that have stories and are so comfortable in talking about it. They're not looking for anything. They're not looking to have a spot on a show, or they genuinely want to tell you about their experiences. They send you information through the mail. We get to, look at it, letters, emails. That to me is more memorable than walking into an establishment where I know something's going to occur. I could feel it, especially if it's a huge building and many things have happened. That to me it's irrelevant because it's a given, obviously. So to me, what's more memorable are the connections with people that are very interested, that are open-minded, that are willing to learn and are willing to share what they've gone through, what they know. You start to learn that we're all connected in that way, and that it's really not that unusual. It's not that scary.
Yeah.
Question, Brock?
No, I don't have a question. I was just agreeing.
Does your father come to you in any way to visit, or does he let himself be known?
Yeah, and I'm not just saying that because of who he was. I mean, I had a hard time when he passed. In fact, one of the first happenings was there was a local team in Florida that had asked if I wanted to sit in on the phone with a ghost box session, and I was like, I'm not techie. I'm not interested in this. This is back in 2009. It's like I don't know, and so I did, and listened in on the phone. And all of a sudden, many were trying to come through to get their words out as well. It's like a door where you have all these spirits trying to get through to be heard. And my father was announced, and he came through, and we have the recordings, and you can't make it up. It wasn't manipulated, nothing. I have all the MP3s. And after that, I started to have to revisit this ghost box and the way the technology picks up the energy, and that it can't be manipulated, and that it's raw, it's there, it's in the moment, everybody's witnessing it, nobody was looking for it, And that kind of started my path and awareness of other forms of communication. The fact that it was my father made it obviously personal and very close, but over the years became more of a research. So now when we communicate with him, it's guiding us towards ESPs, guiding us towards, this type of work, because that is what a big part of what we feel is missing. People are just so gung-ho, and like we said, we're so pop culture of what's on TV, but it really has nothing to do with that. And he's trying to bring it back to old school, and I understand why. But he's still very much alive. He's not reincarnated, he's still around working, and that hasn't changed. He always was working. He never stopped. Why would he stop now?
Right. And we were talking on break. I was telling all the listeners know that I'm stuck at like 11, 12 years old. And I said I look up old YouTube videos all the time. And I was just watching Regis and Kathy Lee from like 1999 episode last week. Your dad, can you tell us a story about how your dad used to investigate with different types of people?
Yeah, well, his whole system of working was because he traveled globally, whether he was out in Europe or he was in New York or, parts of the East Coast, West Coast, it didn't matter. He always had contacts everywhere that he could meet up with that would partner up with him. So he would have the photographer, he would have the medium in tow, he would have the historian, he was the parapsychologist, he would talk to the local news people. He had people everywhere. He was very unique, he was very genuine, and he was very direct on who did what. So everybody had a function to do. So it's not like he had a group of people that traveled the world. There was people around the world that met up with him. They had much respect for him. They themselves had their own data and work, and everybody came to the table to share. There was no competition. Everybody was well within their own rights, and that's how he worked. So that's why we don't have a team, because we're the same way. We have colleagues in Virginia and, Maryland, and we've got UK and California, New York. I think it's awesome. It's great. And that's for us. That's what we do.
Yeah. And that's what I think is missed today somewhat, especially by a lot of the new groups, is, like we said earlier, it's all about they want to be the next big thing. They want to be the next TV thing. And I think a lot of times we lose that connection, and I think that's only hurting the field.
Agreed.
And it's a shame.
You have to separate that. It's the problem is today there's too many little things going on, and it gets lost in translation, and everybody gets lumped into this is the paranormal, when in reality it's not. The paranormal is so different than what it was back in the day. I certainly don't want any part of that, so I'm not interested in that.
We have 2 minutes left, and we have one more question from the chat. Is there some place that you would like to investigate that you haven't had a chance to yet?
I would like to get my butt into a castle. I really would. There's so many great castle stories in general, also from my father. I'm just fascinated with the structures. I think they're just absolutely beautiful. The history of them, what went on. I think if somebody puts me into an asylum or prison one more time, I think I'm just going to cry. So I would like to go into a castle.
I agree with you. That would be awesome.
Yeah, totally.
Good answer.
Jimmy, I think we should fuel up the plane and let's all go.
Any can you give us your links again, Alexandra, on how people could find you on
Sure. They can visit alexandraholzer.com. We're on Facebook. I have my public page on Facebook under my name, and then we have on Facebook The Hunt with Holzer as well. Anything that we do that's upcoming, people can find information there. And, we're very communicative. I answer people when they write to me. I always write back and try to help, and that's what we're doing, and that's where we are. So.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. That went by real quick.
Yes.
Next week's Edwin Becker is going to be with us. And thank you very much, Alexandra. Good night, Brock. Good night, Dave. Good night, listeners. Good night, Alexandra.
Good night. Thank you. Bye.
Good night, fellas.